All right. Merry Christmas Eve, everybody. So glad to be talking today. It is indeed Christmas Eve, December 24th. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and if you celebrate Christmas or not, I hope you have a really nice holiday season and, get a nice break with your family. The news may not be great. I think a lot of the people who watch Halitics may be more upset about the news even than I am, and well, I don't know if you could be more upset. I'm awfully upset. But at least maybe even more troubled by the recent presidential election results than I am. And certainly than the Americans who voted for the winner. That wasn't me. I also will say today's program is not going to be one of those where I just focus on how bad the Democrats are. There's going to be a lot of talk about just how scary the incoming administration is very possibly going to be and how much damage it will do. And I know there are going to be folks who are going to say, well, Hal, we told you how bad Trump was. That's why you should have voted for him. Why didn't you get it? You should have been. It's your fault. If you'd only voted for Harris, then we wouldn't have this nightmare coming on. If you'd only called for people to vote for Harris, this nightmare wouldn't be coming on. My response is no. I'm not saying it was okay to vote for it. Just because Trump is really bad, and I've been saying that over and over, that's the reason why Harris was such a bad choice. Because the alternative was also terrible. So the Democrats put us in a position where we had to choose either genocider A or genocider B. Well, again, I wasn't going to fall for that, but unfortunately, so many millions did, and we are going to see, bad times, as we would have regardless of who won that race between the two Republican nominees. I will, again, we're going to start with, let's get to just do the Gaza situation because it's just as horrific as ever under Harris Biden, right? I mean, that's the thing. We'll talk about how bad it's going to get under, or how bad it very likely is going to be under Trump, but it's already really, really awful under Biden. There are also some real concerns about the domestic response of the Trump administration to protests, right? To our democracy, to what the vestiges that remain are peaceably organizing our meeting to protest really terrible government policies. And that seems to be what may be the biggest threat right now, along with, the threat to, I would say the threat to the Palestinians, but that threat is materialized already. They're being eradicated. But a right to protest that eradication is clearly now potentially going to be even less protected than it was under Harris Biden. And it was not fully protected under Harris Biden whatsoever, but may become even less so. So there's a lot of reasons to be really, really worried. And we're going to get into this. But nothing is as bad around the world right now than the situation in Palestine, and you can see there the numbers well over 45,000 now. Just keeps going up every single day. It just keeps going up. All I can do is tell you about it. I will protest. I will go out there and try to do what I can. I'll be out with Code Pink next year for sure. Tell people. Trying to talk to legislators, those few who will listen. But of course, if they're listening, they're already going to be on our side. So you do have to wonder what's the value. 240-242-5646 if you want to talk to me. Today's your second to last opportunity to talk to me before the new year. And so we'll have today and then we'll have Friday. 21 more killed yesterday, identified dead as a result of the Israeli Nakba, the cruelty, the genocide. There's only so many words. English language is, I believe, very, very beautiful. I love the English language. I was an English major, but all languages are limited. There's only so many words in them. There's only so many ways you can say things. There are some things you can't really say. So English, as evocative as it is, as powerful as it is, as rich a language as it is, does perhaps lack the capacity horrors Israeli genocidal state is doing. I saw a post today from a relative of not mine, but by marriage, who lives in Israel. No, I guess they're not in Israel now. They were Israeli, but they don't live in Israel at this point. And referred to a victim on October 7th as having been burned alive. And the point of that post was obviously to excite anger, excite emotions against Palestine, against Palestinians, against those who are the current victims, right? Yes, there were victims on October 7, and they suffered terribly. They were murdered, and their families are still in pain, and the hostages are still being held. Some of them are. Some were killed by Israel. But that post reminding us of that victim isn't designed to prevent future victims. It isn't designed to save those who are currently being held. It isn't designed to move us towards peace. It's only designed to excite the passions, to anger, to boil one's blood. So we'll countenance, so we'll overlook, so we'll accept the current ongoing mass murder by Israel and Palestine. So I can't feel much, as a result of that post. All victims are victims, but right now, the victims are in Gaza, are in Palestine, and right now the victimizer is Israel. And even on October 7, Palestinians were far more at risk of ongoing violence and brutality than Israelis were. Just in that moment, in that place, a terrible crime was committed. Israel and the Biden-Harris administration have now killed over 45,338 identified Gazans. We say over because obviously there's so many in the rubble, and we've seen estimates in the hundreds of thousands. And you have the 21 victims. Just include the word yesterday that got cut off. Do hope you'll click like. Do hope you'll subscribe. Again, this is Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, 240-242-5646. It's not a real cheery holiday season. I'm not feeling it at this point. But, I hope people do get some joy, take joy from their families, take joy from the presence of loved ones. And if, you're fortunate, then be grateful for your good fortune and hopefully try to make life a little better for those around you, those who don't have much. Something that I regret in my life is feeling that I haven't done nearly enough to make people around me happy, to make people around me feel good. And I'm going to try to use the rest of my years to change that to the extent I possibly can. There was something I was going to say. Oh, in terms of, yes. Okay, so this was an interesting thought that came into my own, really came in my mind, but was put in my mind. I can't remember where I read this, but apparently it's a relatively well-known person who was talking about how the whole idea of Santa Claus is incredibly cruel. The whole idea that, you'll get presents if you're good, the good kids get presents, the kids who aren't don't. And the idea that is, conveyed obviously to poorer children is that they're not worth very much. They're not very valuable. They're not as important. They're not as special. They're not as good as kids who get bigger, fancier, more expensive gifts. I think there's no question that's accurate. So people are always, that's in our genetic makeup. we're always going to favor our closest relatives because they have our genes. That's just the way we've evolved. That's the way all species evolve. That's how come we evolve in the first place. That's how come we survive. Because we take the steps that we can take to maximize the likelihood that we will survive and we will produce offspring who will themselves survive and be in a position to produce offspring. Well, obviously, you want to spend your resources, if that's your ultimate unconscious, subconscious goal. If that's your goal, you're going to spend your resources mostly on, first of all, making sure you have enough, and then making sure your offspring and the people who take care of your offspring have enough. That is just simply the way, there's no other way to maximize the survival of your progeny, your offspring, of your genes. And ultimately, that's what we're all impelled to do. So given that's the biological fact, how do we address a situation where people who have less, much less, often nothing at all, are going to be unhappy, first and foremost, because their needs aren't being met. Their basic human needs aren't being met. Their ability to, first of all, survive, second of all, thrive, third of all, reproduce is greatly reduced, right? You don't have enough to eat, you're going to die. You're not going to have children. And even if you have children, they're going to die too if you can't provide for them. So how do we deal with that in light of the fact that all of us are also going to do the best we can, the most we can for ourselves and our own, not for others? Well, the answer seems to me so obvious. You have to create a society where everyone has enough and no one has too much, where we simply make sure that there aren't billionaires. And at the same time, we give enough through government, through our laws, our legislating, that guarantees everyone has enough. I mean, it's just so obvious. And we are currently governed by kleptocrats, cacistocracy, plutocrats, kleptocrats. That's our government. That's what we have. That's what we had before this election, and that's what we're going to have after this election. And it's not good. No, it's just that simple. It's just not good at all. From Haaretz, I guess they're kind of the establishment liberal, not the Israeli, not the, the Jerusalem Post. There's the Israeli Times, I guess, Israel Times, I'm not sure. Anyway, Haaretz is kind of the New York Times. It's sort of the establishment. Maybe they're a little bit to the left of the New York Times. Maybe they're the Guardian of Israel, whatever. From Haaretz. And here you can see that headline. I circled it in magenta at the top there. How Israel, with its megalomaniacal arrogance, that's a good word, Israel is turning into ancient Athens. So that's sort of a link. That's kind of a teaser. You click on that and you go to that article. But the main clip I took from this was the analysis, how Trump and the GOP plan to dismantle the U.S. pro-Palestinian movement. So that's very, very upsetting to me. I'm part of I like to think of myself as part of the pro-Palestinian movement. I do my stream every day. I talk about Palestine. I go to events now and then. I campaign. I go down to the Hill. So yeah, I'm part of it. And that it's going to be dismantled. It's very upsetting, very troubling to me. We'll get to that. But I did, as I mentioned earlier, just a moment ago, put in that oval there, the megalomaniacal arrogance, Israel's turning into ancient Athens. So that really struck me because I've mentioned this. I do see the similarities between Israel and the Athenian Empire. And it's kind of distressing to me because I look at, just as I want to care about Israel, just as I want to believe in Israel, just as there's an inside in me, there's concern for Israel. I'm horrified by what they're doing. And just as, history is written by the winner. So, right, Athens didn't win its war against Sparta. In the end, it lost. But until it lost, it was kind of the winner, right? It was the big bully on the block, the richest nation state or city state by far, much richer than Sparta. Much more powerful, bigger army, bigger, huge navy, lording it over everybody. They only won because they made so many enemies, everyone hated them, and they overreached to such a great degree that they finally were defeated. But it was their colossal arrogance and hubris, right? Violence against weaker opponents that did them in. And that's what the Haaretz piece talks about. What struck me, though, I wanted to focus on this a little bit, isn't necessarily the big picture, right? Which is the Pericles and the Athenian the citizens who are the wealthy landowners, men of Athens, that they launched this war that ultimately destroyed their city and much of Greece and beyond, but not the bigger picture, but the small picture, just looking at some of the actions that Athens took that were so cruel and so counter to what we would want to believe the most advanced, the most enlightened, the home of democracy, right? The founder of democracy, Athens, the founder of democracy. And yet what they like Israel, is now they became a genocidal state in their violent throes against their fellow Greeks, for crying out loud. So this is from our primary source firsthand, right? He wrote during the war. He was there, Thucydides, general, who wasn't really all that, I guess, gung-ho about any of this stuff. He just tells you what happened. So in the 16th year of war, Alcibiades, who was kind of I guess he was still elected, but he was a little bit of a tyrant also, was, getting involved. Argos is Sparta area, the Peloponnesus. Athens is not in the Peloponnesus, it's the Peloponnesian War, because it's Athens against the Peloponnesians. And of course, Athens calls it that, right? I mean, it was the Athenian general, because they're in charge. They make the rules, they call it what they will. So their war was against the Peloponnesus, so we'll call it the Peloponnesian War, not the Athenian War, even though it's really Athens that was as much to blame as anyone. So Alcibiades, the new tyrant, or new, I guess, kind of still, they don't call him president, but first citizen, sails with 20 ships to Argos on the peninsula there and see some people who had rebelled. Lacedaemonians were supposed to be their allies, but there were some who didn't, who were, I guess, Athens would call them traitors. And they took them. And at the same time, though, he made this look at this. This is this tiny little island of Milos. Look at how many ships the Athenians send into Milos. 30 ships of their own, 6 Chios, 2 Lesbos, 1,600 heavy infantry, 300 archers, and another 20 mounted on horses, and 1,500 heavy infantry to boot from allies. So 3,100 armed men and 320 archers. So you're looking at a tiny little island. They have as many soldiers on that island maybe as there are islanders, or close. They're scared. They're terrorizing this island. And why are they? What did the poor Melians do? What did they do to excite this anger, this enormous expedition against them? Well, Thucydides tells you they're a colony of Lacedaemon that would not. Remember, Lacedaemonians are by and large had been allies, right? They were terrified of being allies. They were told you have to be allies, or we're gonna occupy your land. we're going to colonize. But Milos didn't want to get involved. They're like, it's not our fight. We don't, just leave us alone, please. But they would not submit to the Athenians like the other islanders. All the other islanders would, but not Milos. And they stayed neutral. But afterwards, when the Athenians began violence and hostility and plundering, right? Kind of like what we see, I would say, on the West Bank, right? By Israel. Plundering. Open violence. The Malians, after a while, got sick of it, and they assumed an attitude of hostility. They said, well, if you're going to put it to us, we're not going to put up with it. We'll do what we can against you. So the Athenians had enough. They're like, no, you don't get to know. We tell you, if we want to plunder, we'll plunder. If we want to, steal your land, we'll steal your land. And you'll take it. And that's the end of it. So they went to Milos and they said, surrender. We've got this enormous army. We want you to surrender. And the Malians respond with, and they're like, we're not going to have a debate. We're not going to hear your arguments why it's wrong for us to do this. We're not going to get into like a UN type situation where we debate why we're justified. We don't care about any of that stuff. We're not in the business of telling you what's okay and what isn't okay and hearing your complaints if you have any. No, we've got an enormous army. We've got our archers. We've got our infantry. And your choice is either submit or we're going to starve you out. We're going to put you under siege, and that's the end of it. So if you want to, talk to us, we'll listen for a while. We'll have a debate. We'll have a discussion anyway, but that's as far as it'll go. Those are your choices. So the Malians say, so basically what you're telling us is we have two choices. One choice is war, which obviously we're going to lose, and the other is slavery. And the Athenians are like, yeah, exactly. So the Malians think about it for a while, and they're like, okay, sucks, but yeah, I guess war. And we're not going to submit. So as soon as that happened, the Athenians surround the city on the island. They put it under siege, and at one point, because they're busy, they got a lot of irons and a lot of fires. They got to divert troops here and send troops there. There's rebels everywhere in their empire. And when the Israelis were a little bit diverted, kind of like when the Athenians were a little bit diverted, kind of like when the Palestinians went into that music festival, the Malians took another part of the Athenian lines, which were but feebly garrisoned, right? And so in response, reinforcements were sent from Athens, and the siege was now pressed vigorously. And something happened inside the city, who knows what. The Malians decided that we were going to just surrender. The response from the Athenians after the surrender, they put to death all the grown men and subsequently sold the women and children for slaves, and then colonized and took over the island for themselves. I mean, does history repeat itself or what? Is this not exactly what we're seeing? I don't see any real differences. What frustrates me, I guess, a tiny bit is I don't like to put Israel in the same breath as Athens, because I look at Athens, I'm like, well, they were advanced. They invented philosophy. They were great artists. They started democracy at all, the home of democracy. Israel is this cruel, very undemocratic place. But, it is what it is. Both sides do, when you're when you're powerful, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so we're seeing in Israel exactly what we saw in a very near part of the Mediterranean Sea. Mass murder, hubris, violence, genocide. Because that's what the Athenians did. They genocided Milos. They killed all the men, sold the women, destroyed the civilization completely, sold the women and children to slavery, and then colonized the area themselves. It's exactly what Israel's doing right now to Palestine. So you'd think, you'd hope, right? We're the West, right? The U.S., we're sort of the spiritual, we want to believe the spiritual descendants of the Athenians as well. And we totally take the side of the genociders. And we just elected, in an election where we had a choice between two unwavering supporters of Israel, two candidates who were unwilling in any way to really criticize what Israel's doing. And I always think it's kind of funny because people would say to me, oh, that's not true. That's not true. Because Kamala would always say, oh, it's too many, it's horrible what's happening. Oh, we need a ceasefire, right? Oh, we need a ceasefire. As though that's critical of Israel? We need a ceasefire? No, critical of Israel is stopping us. Bibi is preventing a ceasefire, and we've got to take him on. That's criticism. Not, oh, we need a ceasefire now. The Biden-Harris administration was far from friendly, welcoming of criticism. And many Democrats, like Hillary, wanted to crack down hard on protesters, on critics of Israel. We'll probably see it taken to a higher level, to the next level by Trump. You can see here, this is from Haaretz yesterday, how Trump and the GOP plan to dismantle the U.S. pro-Palestinian movement. And first they talk about, in this article, they talk about his nominees. And the first two, and I mentioned these two, Rubio and Stefanik, not as much in the article. They don't mention the Fox guy. What was his name? He was the governor, Huckabee. 4 weeks before Trump takes power, all his rhetoric and appointments indicate that his campaign's vow to crack down on pro-Palestinian sentiment will be a defining factor of his early days. And one of the big reasons for this, and they talk about it, is he's going to have a lot of trouble getting other aspects of his agenda through. There's a bare majority in the House. And, my son, who's was a reporter, congressional reporter for a while, does something else now, works in journalism, but something slightly different, points out it's really no majority because there are moderate Republicans who don't like Trump, can't stand Trump, and aren't going to go along with Trump. So maybe it's a majority, but it's not much of one. But one thing that pretty much all the Republicans, not all of them, not, for example, Tom Massey, but most of the Republicans agree on is we've got to back Israel to the hill. Just as many, not all Democrats, not to the same percent, but there are plenty of Democrats who will join with Trump and join with the administration in cracking down on any criticism of Israel, suppressing it, anti-democratic action, they'll support it, anti-small d democratic. Josh Gottheimer, people like him, Richie Torres, the whole AIPAC bunch, probably Glenn Ivey, probably, who's the one in Ohio who beat, she was a Ohio long-term Democratic functionary. I can't remember. She beat Nina Turner twice. So they're all going to be all in for Israel. The House. I was going to say Schiff, but he's now in the Senate. But there's not going to be any difficulty passing anti-democratic, pro-Zionist, pro-genocide legislation is going to get passed. And it's, will the courts reverse some of those laws? Probably not. Probably they won't. Constitutional. It'd be surprising. It happened. So what you're looking at now, what is very likely to happen, a quick and complete clampdown on any pro-Palestine activities. This is one of the few paths that are clear for this administration, in part for the reason I stated. They're going to get plenty of Democratic support. Hell of a two-party system we got here, right? Haaretz goes into Rubio and Stefanik as two of the most important, both who want now to deport pro-Palestinian protesters who aren't citizens. I'm not sure if that would be legal, but I suppose it would be. Although you do have, the Constitution has been ruled to protect non-citizens. I'm not sure that any court is going to uphold the right of Palestinians, their allies in this country, to protest. So many will be sent back, presumably to Gaza and the West Bank, where they'll be murdered. That's what we have to look forward to. It's not just Stefanik and Rubio who are going to be the problem, who are the problems. It's throughout this administration. It's aggressively Zionist. Pam Bondi, she was not the first choice. Remember, the first choice was Gates. The Slays report pretty much, the guy's a sleaze, right? He's really scummy. I'm not going to defend him. But again, politics is the art of the possible. And as bad as Gates is on a personal level, politically, he's much better than Pam Bondi. But he wasn't good on Israel. I think was a staunch Israel supporter as well. So I believe. I'd have to go look into that a little more, but that's in my mind. I didn't look into that closely. So Bondi, Trump's second attempt at a nominee for Attorney General, has called for revocation of visas and condemned the campus protests. One area that they're, I guess, a little better or not as bad is they're not buying into this new, harsher, more aggressive definition of anti-Semitism. They don't want to add to, hate crimes, any kind of criticism of Palestine as being anti-Semitic. That's one area where this administration is not quite as willing to kowtow to the Zionist lobby. But that's not so much because they care about overreaching or being too ready, too quick to condemn legitimate speech as somehow hate speech. It's not that they're concerned about that. It's that they just don't like the idea of prosecuting haters, which I get, by the way. I am not a big believer in going after hate speech either. And yeah, I'd rather not have a way overbroad, totally unreasonable definition of anti-Semitism. So I guess that's sort of a little bit less bad than what we could have expected from the Harris administration, if there were one. Look at this. Well, yeah, Gates didn't like that anti-Semitism bill either, which isn't gonna pass now, which isn't going to become law. So I guess that's like the one kind of silver lining, but I give it a very, very little silver lining, because the real concern right now is the treatment of Palestinians, the treatment of pro-Palestinian protesters. That is going to be awful in this administration. And so here's more from what Pam Bondi, the Attorney General nominee, says. And this is troubling because, of course, she prosecutes. So she's going to be prosecuting people who protest against Israel. And here's what she says. Whether they're here as Americans, meaning I assume American citizens, or on student visas, if they're out there saying, I support Hamas, they need to be taken out of our country. Or if they're citizens, the FBI needs to be interviewing them right away. Great. So I guess a lot of college kids and others, Jewish Voice for Peace, Students for Justice in Palestine, I guess we're all going to get our door knocked pretty soon by FBI agents. And that's one area where maybe, just maybe, Gates would have been a little better because he didn't like the FBI. He wanted to get rid of the FBI. So maybe Bondi's not there. Bondi's pro-FBI. So maybe that would have been an area where, again, Democrats for sure shot us in the foot by torpedoing Matt Gaetz. But they don't care because they're not. They're resigning it. They're in the pocket for AIPAC too. Another terrible development when it comes to justice for the Palestinians and their cause. This guy, Rep. Brian Mast, I don't know who he is. He is going to chair the House Foreign Affairs Committee after Trump advocated on his behalf. Now think about that. Trump's like, okay, I'm going to go after the student protesters. I don't like protests. I don't like anyone challenging authority, which I think is really what's behind this more than some sort of love for Israel. Not that I'm not saying he's not a Zionist, but I think he just doesn't want protests, right? And by the way, please click like, please click subscribe. Really would love to have you do that. Oh, and I'm going to check. Oh, I haven't checked yet. Let me just go look at the chat. I think there was a couple. We got Emogi and Ari Magoo. Hey guys, good to see you. Thanks for the positive comment there, Ari, about the history. Yeah, I mean, we can see this over and over, how empires wield their power, even if it's presumably a democracy. They wield their power violently and genocidally. So this is the most hostile lawmaker to Palestinians. Trump has no problem sticking his oar in saying, I want this guy to be my House Foreign Affairs Committee chair because he's going to be aggressive and push my agenda. And obviously, Pelosi has no trouble doing that either. She didn't like the agenda. She doesn't like the agenda that AOC might push, so she's going to nominate and push for and get a dying 74-year-old who's got very little following or clout except within his own caucus. I wish we had leaders in the Democratic side who were willing to really push a progressive agenda the way Trump pushes his agenda. So here's what Mast says. I don't think we should lightly throw around the term innocent Palestinian civilians. Nobody said innocent Nazi civilians. So let's get why that's such a pernicious and dishonest BS. The Nazis weren't all the people in Germany. The Nazis were people who chose to be Nazis. They said, okay, we're going to embrace a genocidal, murderous ideology. But Palestinians are just people who live in Palestine. They're not all necessary. They don't necessarily support Hamas. And Hamas aren't Nazis either. They're right now defending their people. So it's very different. It's an absurd comparison. But if you said, well, there were a lot of innocent German civilians killed in Dresden, I would say that's accurate. But I'd still have a little bit of a problem with that term because Germany did start that war. Germany did, bring carnage and destroy the continent of Europe for probably 20, 30 years. So it's a little different. Germany as a nation was responsible for World War II. But Palestine isn't responsible for what Israel's doing to it. Israel's responsible 100% for that. And finally, yes, I would say this. I don't love the term innocent German civilians. Of course, the term innocent Nazi civilians is kind of ridiculous. Maybe if you want to talk about some Nazi Hitler Youth or something, okay, maybe we could say that. But I don't love that term. But you know what? It fits. There were innocent German civilians. There were plenty. who were killed by British bombs, indiscriminate nighttime bombing that just lit up cities. Yeah, they were innocent victims. They were killed. They were probably anti-Nazis who were killed. Doesn't mean that the British were necessarily wrong to conduct those kind of high civilian death toll raids. I understand why they did it. I would argue they shouldn't have, but, I don't know if the morality is so clear-cut. But that's wholly different qualitatively from what Israel's doing. So that's just BS. So this guy's a bad apple. He's a bad actor. He's somebody who shouldn't be running anything. But he will be. And you know what? If you want to blame someone, you know who you should blame? Blame the Democrats for putting up such an awful candidate as Kamala, for having such a bad administration as the Harris-Biden administration that did so much harm that we simply couldn't vote for them. All right, I got a caller calling in. It's great to have callers. Always love to. And I'm just going to mute you for just 1 second. Caller, we're at F10. Yeah, mute. All right, so let's go right to you. Caller, who do I have? Great to talk to you, by the way. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, Hal. Ari Magoo.
Oh, Ari, great to have you on. I know you had been working up the nerve to call. So happy holidays, by the way, and thanks for checking in.
I got the day off today.
Awesome.
And do I sound okay, or should I get myself off speaker first?
No, I'm okay. I'm not getting feedback right now, and you're not.
Good. Excellent.
Actually, I am getting feedback, so yes, go do that. I am. I can see the feedback, so I'm going to mute you for now. Sorry, folks. Okay, you got your headset on?
How's this, better?
I hope so. Yes, it is. Now there's no feedback. I'll have to go back and edit a little bit of that maybe. But yeah, what's on your mind, sir?
Hal, I wanted to say thanks, first of all, for what you're doing. And I'm also on and taking the first couple of minutes to talk about Gaza. I think that's amazing. I love that. And my question to you is, what do you think about, when you read stuff about from Haaretz, that's a newspaper in Israel, I believe, is the Israeli media even more harsh rather than the American media on what's going on in Israel? About Gaza, etc.
So I just muted you for a sec. I'm going to mute you when I'm talking just so I don't get the feedback. I can see I'm not getting it, so that's good. I don't quite understand the question. I understood what you said. You said, is the Israeli more harsh? Do you mean is the Israeli media being a little more honest about how bad Israel is acting? Or do you mean is the Israeli media even less willing to call Israel out?
Well, I know Haaretz is one of the more liberal, I believe, on the spectrum, but yeah, in general, are we more quiet in the American media about the terrible atrocities and genocide? Or on the other hand,
I think it's worse. Let me just jump in again. I think it's worse, Ari, in Israel. We do get the truth here. I think Israel is really, and I haven't been to Israel, but from what I understand, the propaganda is just off the charts in Israel. The Israeli Times, I think it's called, is just a pure propaganda outfit of the Netanyahu government. And Haaretz is not all that progressive. I mean, they're willing to criticize Netanyahu, but they have not condemned, certainly not from any kind of humanitarian standpoint, what Israel is doing. So I think in the U.S. it's bad here. A lot of the media is dishonest, but I think we get more of the truth. We get access, for example, to the Al Jazeera network. We get all the Arab papers are here. So I do believe, Ari, it's worse there. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Hal. That's a good one. My second question is, you've mentioned it before, but you're also an American Jew. What is it that makes an American Jew more understanding, let's say, of the Gaza situation, of the Palestinian situation? If you can, it's a personal question. If you can answer it, or if you have personal view, as opposed to the majority probably who are staunch pro-Israel, no matter what Israel Netanyahu does.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. I mean, I guess all of us are, ourselves, and we're all different. I will certainly say that many of my family members don't agree with me at all. Now, my immediate family, they do pretty much agree with me. And I remember when I was a kid and I got into an argument. It's sort of an interesting sideline. Answer is a little bit of a long-winded answer, and I'm sorry for that, Ari. But I remember when I was, I guess, out of law school or in law school, and then I became a vegetarian for a while. And I was mostly because I just realized how wrong it is the way we treat animals before we eat them. And it's just a horrible thing. And I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea that, humans, we did evolve as hunters. And I don't think it's unnatural for us to eat animals. And, if I know people who hunt, and some of them actually hunt because they need to, right? I mean, they save money. People say, oh, it's so much more expensive. You have to buy a gun. And you have to, once you have that gun, the shells aren't that expensive. You kill a deer. That's going to feed you for a while. That's going to be a lot cheaper. You kill a bear, a deer, there's a lot of meat. It's cheaper than going to the butcher. And also that deer was free until you killed it, or pretty free anyways. So I'm not opposed to all meat eating, but the way we do it in this country or in the West is so wrong. I became a vegetarian for a while and I stopped because it was just too much trouble. It was hard, but I still think it's wrong to eat meat. Anyway, I was talking to my father about this and he got mad at me. He was like, oh, we didn't raise you to be like that. I'm like, yeah, you did. You raised me to question, to try to be moral, to try to do the right thing, to look at, both sides of every issue. So I'm like, yeah, I mean, I think my upbringing is part of it. I think it's just who I am as a person. But yeah, you're right. So many Jews don't see it. And I think it's very, very unfortunate.
Yeah, thank you for that. Hal, I have one last one. I don't want to hold up the whole program. So my last one would be, maybe you just a suggestion, maybe you should make a program on how you came about that sort of revelation or awakening to that, even though later you went back to a more compromised view of eating meat. That would be a very interesting show, because I think it does happen to lots of people. I know personal friends of mine that one guy actually went into a slaughterhouse and he became a vegetarian like soon after that. He quit the job like after a few days. So that would be an amazing show if you can ever do one. I wouldn't mind really watching that very closely, because I have a lot of interest in both. All kinds of I'm a food technologist by background, so I like to know more about food choices, the diet craze out there, etc. But how you came to that revelation, which probably influenced you, not just in vegetarianism, but how you see the world, how you see people. I think, from my viewpoint.
Yeah. Hey, it's great to talk to you, Ari. I'll let you go, I guess, because you're done. You don't have anything else, right? Because I don't want to cut you off. I love getting calls. You've been such a great commenter.
Thank you.
But otherwise, I'm going to wish you a great holiday, unless you have something else.
You're the best. Thank you.
All right. What a nice treat to have Ari call in, and you can see his comments in the chat. Really awesome to have him there, and so thank you. Thanks, Ari. And I was really touched. I'm a little choked up because I'm trying to reach people. And when I find there's people who seem to take, what I have to say seriously and are want to work. Because to me, it's not about me. I mean, obviously it is. It's somewhat, you have to be a narcissist to do this in the first place. I think people really care what you have to say. But it's really about trying to build a movement and make things a little bit better. So getting back to that guy Mast, right? The Congress member that Trump pushed to have Foreign Affairs Committee. He is the worst, according to a lot, in terms of anti-Palestine. He spearheaded legislation to permanently cut U.S. funding for UNRWA, and he's advocated for expedited and expanded weapon sales to Israel. So it'd be even worse. I mean, how could it be worse, though? We give them everything that we want. We give them everything they want, no matter what. Why would they cut off UNRWA? We've talked about this before. UNRWA has been an authoritative voice on the ground for Palestine. It's just that simple. There's just no other reason. And I was thinking about that because I was thinking specifically about what Mast is threatening and wants to do, cut off any U.S. support for UNRWA. When I saw this headline, this is from a Arabic newspaper, obviously the English version. The source from UNRWA: one Palestinian child killed every hour in Gaza. Now, I know Mast doesn't like the term innocent Palestinian, but you're saying those Palestinians are guilty of something? Those children? What are they guilty of? Wanting to live where Israel wants to occupy and colonize? Is that it? I don't know what else it could be. Yeah, so yeah, things are bad, period. Now, I have been someone who, I wouldn't say I defend Trump, but I try to point out the inconsistencies and the dishonesty and the disingenuousness in many of the progressive attacks, or the attacks from the left, especially by Democrats on Trump. I've tried to be fair to Trump. Here is Jeffrey Sachs, who I have a lot of respect for. He is I believe, a professor. He's extremely knowledgeable about foreign affairs. I don't know that much about him, but he used to be, I guess, kind of part of the mic, but now has really become a harsh critic. He loves Tulsi Gabbard. I like Tulsi Gabbard too. This is a guy who is going to compliment Trump, and I want to play this for you. And again, bearing in mind that I have been, in general, someone who I wouldn't say sees a silver lining in Trump, but tries to find, or at least point out, where I think Trump's getting a raw deal. Here's a guy who's giving Trump some props, and I'll address whether I think that those props are fair. And this is an expert, somebody who knows a hell of a lot more about foreign policy than I'll ever know. Here is Jeffrey Sachs.
She's probably, and I don't want to jinx anything, she's probably the most important appointment of the Trump administration.
It does seem that way.
She is incredibly intelligent, incredibly honest, incredibly committed to U.S. security, and would do a superb job. So that's why she's being opposed.
So I pretty much agree with what Sachs said there in terms of Tulsi's qualifications. I don't know who could be better. This is someone who's dedicated her life to serving our nation. She has done many trips abroad. I think her visit to Assad was brave and the right thing to do. All that said, he's overstating it. As much as I want to believe that she's the most important pick because her appointment signals a change in the direction, the pro-war direction of American foreign policy, and you could certainly take it that way, Haaretz has the better argument. These anti-Palestine, these pro-genocide picks of Trump, there's lots of them. It's not just one, it's not just two. They're throughout the administration. Bondi, we already discussed some of them. Rubio, Stefanik, Huckabee, this guy Mast, picked by Trump to be a House committee leader. That is where we can see the bloody fangs of the Trump administration that mirror those of the Harris-Biden. So I think Tulsi is a good pick. She's pro-peace. I really like her. I hope that she's confirmed and her voice is heard. But right now, I'm more concerned about what Haaretz is telling us is likely to happen to Palestine and pro-Palestine protesters. Then I'm hopeful that Tulsi signals a new direction. All right, 240-242-5646. Yeah, there's a strike going on. I guess I want to talk about that briefly. It's not the most, for me, it's not the most interesting thing, although probably it should be. I'm really trying not to break this strike at all. Amazon and Starbucks workers are on strike. Trump might have something to do with it. So we'll talk about that. This is from AP. Good article a couple days ago, I think. I meant to talk about it yesterday, but got into the whole discussion about fake AOC, right? Fake OC. I was wondering, I got so many hits for my Friday program. It did really well. And then yesterday, very few. My wife said it's probably because people are already, taking their holiday and they don't want to watch videos or they're away or what have you. Maybe. But I thought that fake AOC thumbnail would really bring some folks in, but so far not so good. Maybe it has to do with the algorithm. It has to do with who what is that damn YouTube, right? Google sends them to. I would also note, and that's why I was saying, hey, please click like, because I got some new subscriptions out of that program. That was good, but not a lot of likes. So I'd love to see more likes as well. And that, there we go. Let's see. Oh, there's the like button. There it is. Yeah, there's that like button. That's what I want to show you. And again, don't forget, click subscribe. Click subscribe now. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me like Ari. Amazon and Starbucks workers are on strike. I'm not going to break that strike. I will tell you right now. It's very easy for me. Certainly, I'm not going to break the Starbucks strike. In other words, I'm not going to Starbucks. That's not in any way a hardship for me because I never go to Starbucks. I sometimes will buy coffee at a local coffee shop. If I'm traveling, I'm at an airport, I'm at a travel mart or someplace like that, maybe I would go to Starbucks if it's my only option. That's not going to happen. I ain't going to Starbucks coffee, period. Amazon's a little tougher. I do a lot of shopping at Amazon. I have to admit it. I don't, I never argue that other people should boycott a store or business that they, get something out of. I just don't. I don't want to tell people they need to spend more money. I do think whenever possible, you should shop local. I do practice that to a degree. But there's also advantages certainly for Amazon as well. I don't have to go out. It comes right to me. I don't have to drive. I don't have to go some other place, and usually it's cheaper. But that said, I will often buy local when it's equally or even slightly less convenient. But I'm not shopping at Amazon right now. I've actually purchased a few things online, and I haven't bought from Amazon. I bought from like REI, right? I've gone to other, not that they're so great, not that they're anything special, but I'm trying to avoid. So if you can, I would bring that up and just say, hey, try to support the workers wherever you can. But that's a big deal. Amazon is bad actor, big kahuna. They're sort of the Israel of the retail world, the big bully on the block. And so to the extent we can avoid shopping there, we should. There have been some recent wins for labor organizers. The Amazon warehouse in Staten Island did vote to organize, and that vote was recognized. But it's so hard to force these businesses to the table. They'll just do everything possible to keep workers isolated. And that's what Amazon and Starbucks are doing, trying to, according to this article in the AP, run out the clock. Biden will be gone soon. Presumably, there'll be a much more friendly NLRB that will take their side. So that's what they're trying to do. And it's ugly, it's wrong, it's disgusting. It's not absolutely certain that Trump will be awful for them, but probably. What I think at this point, we do have an obligation to the extent we possibly can support these workers. The other problem is it's not even just Trump, it's just the courts, because they'll appeal everything they can. Man, why do people like to go into that kind of law? I went into law to try to make things better for people. When you go into labor law working for big corporations, you're doing just the opposite. Yeah, so this is an interesting article. Again, problems with Trump probably will not be good at all on the NLRB. The one positive there, his labor secretary, Lori Chavez DeRemer, is good. She does have strong support from unions, and maybe Sean O'Brien, who spoke at the RNC, will have Trump's ear to a degree. I don't think Trump is necessarily that doctrinaire about union. I don't assume certainly his hotels have been union workers. So all in all, I like to see the activity. I think we need independent political players, independent of both parties. Certainly the Democrats have not been allies of labor in any meaningful way. I know people say, well, what about the NLRB picks? They were better. And yeah, that's true. I'll give you that. Biden's picks were better. But we've seen over the past 30, 40 years how Democrats have done everything possible not to enact public health care, have supported for-profit health care. We've seen how they've supported free trade deals, not Biden to such a degree as the previous Democrats in office. And free trade has been devastating for labor, American workers. I'm not optimistic. Trump's not going to be a good president for workers, I don't believe. This is an interesting story. Just going through these real quick. I wanted to just touch on these. I read this as somewhat positive. RFK Jr. wants to ban drug ads on TV. It wouldn't be easy, or it won't be easy. Should be, it won't be easy. That's a good thing. Let's hope we get that. That's a real positive. Drug ads are really bad. And the New York Times even acknowledges it. Research has found that the majority of the top advertised drugs offer little or no benefit compared to existing treatments, but they do cost a lot of money. Tens of thousands of dollars. And the reason they do this is because these are proprietary drugs. So you may have generics, you may have various other drugs that do the same work. The only difference is maybe the delivery is a little bit different. So the patent was extended because rather than the original medication, which is now generic, the new medication is a slow release. But it doesn't really matter. It doesn't make any difference. But it just costs that much more money. And patients just buy whatever the doctor prescribes almost all the time. So those advertisements lead to much more expensive treatments, as the New York Times is telling you, and they're very expensive to run the ads. So it's a double, and who pays for that? This all comes out of our healthcare dollars. It's terrible, terrible system. So yes, ads are bad. We say, okay, I want to drink a beer. So I see an ad for, Bud Light, and maybe it makes me drink a crappy beer that I'm not going to really enjoy. Who really cares, right? It doesn't matter. But when it comes to the millions and millions of dollars that we spend on healthcare, often for either less effective or no more effective medications, then you're looking at a system that's broken. And people can't decide. We don't know. I don't know which is better for whatever ailment I'm trying to cure for my high blood pressure. I don't know what's better for it. If I had high blood pressure, I wouldn't know. I'd go with whatever the doctor tells me. But if I see a Bud Light ad and a Miller Lite, I'm like, oh, that's a funny talking horse. I'll go buy the Bud Light, right? Or I like to see John Madden. I remember 40 years ago seeing John Madden burst through a paper cutout. So I'll buy the Miller Lite. I mean, who really cares? But when it comes to the drugs, it matters. It matters a lot. And the ads on TV don't lead to better healthcare choices. They only lead to more expensive ones. But the New York Times can't leave it at that. Instead, they point out some of the benefits. It could spur people to say, I need a medication for my, I've had an upset stomach for a while. Maybe I better go get an expensive generic drug. And then they go on to say, even the most vocal critics say there's some value in ads that prompt people to get a vaccine that they might not have gotten otherwise. Okay, so let's address that. Do we need for-profit, big pharma to put those ads on TV? Or could we just have public service announcements? Let's say that you're spurring people to take an inexpensive generic drug. Again, let's just use the stomach ache as an example. doctors know that many Americans aren't getting treated for certain conditions. So you don't think we could have some public service announcements and say, hey, have you had a stomach ache for the past 2 weeks? It could be this, it could be that. Maybe you should see your doctor. Or maybe you should, as a PSA, not as a for-profit. And the exact same thing for the vaccines. You don't need Pfizer or Merck or whoever makes those vaccines, Moderna. You don't need them to tell you to go get a vaccine. That's perfectly, I'm not saying there shouldn't be prompts, because I'm not an anti-vaxxer by any means, but that's something that the government can do through PSAs, rather than relying on big pharma to have some kind of a sort of a side benefit from their for-profit ads. But the New York Times has to come up with something good. And why? I was like, well, what about the New York Times? Are they getting... Because they also... The New York Times also takes ads from big pharma. This is in that article itself. An article that talks about how the Trump administration is trying to ban, or at least some members of it are trying to ban big pharma ads. There's an ad. This was in that article from Novartis. The new innovation in cancer treatment. It's not just good for the patient. It's good for the regions too. I mean, it's so ridiculous. Probably that's another medication they're promoting that there may be just as good alternatives. But actually, this is for high-tech cancer therapies, so I presume maybe there's some real value there. I don't know, but it's just pretty ironic that they themselves are so tainted by big pharma in an article where they have to come up with some justification for allowing those ads. By the way, yeah, just want to say, Ari, again, great chatting with you too. Appreciate it very, very much. So here's the real reason I guess the New York Times is at best equivocal. And I give them credit because they pointed out that the ads are for, crap, snake oil, nothing that makes things better. Push against TV drug ads threatens to dent the revenues of pharmaceutical companies, which can make back in sales 5 times as much. That's for selling those drugs that don't do any better than what we would get without the ads. And it also would be a problem for major TV networks. Oh, boo-hoo. How awful would that be if our major TV networks weren't getting quite as much revenue from pharmaceutical companies? Come on, man. Come on. This is your concern? These are positives. Better that we don't have all that money spent on crap on TV. The junk that, people consume. And all that, those added sales, that's, again, you're investing money, taxpayer money, then, because it comes from, right, the government, from Obamacare, from the salary withholding that the premiums are paid, right? Because that's where the money comes from for the pharmaceutical companies to make those ads. The premiums that people pay. It just boosts the cost. It doesn't reduce in any way or make more efficient the delivery. It just sends money out of the healthcare system. RFK's right. Musk supporting him, they're right. This is what we should be doing. We should be banning pharmaceutical ads from TV. Now, the Times tries to come up with some arguments against doing it. They take ads from pharmaceutical companies. I will say this. It's not clear that RFK Jr. wants to ban ads from newspapers. I don't think he could anyway. It's not the same as on TV. So you could start, the New York Times suits might say, hey, we'd love it if they can't advertise on NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN. We'd love it if those ads weren't allowed because they would have more money to spend on us, on print. But Musk doesn't apparently even want print ads. He's banned them. He says, I don't go on X much. I don't look. He says there's none on X. Let's see if we can show you that tweet there. But even if it's true that the New York Times as a newspaper would benefit from banning ads on TV from Big Pharma, they're not going to go against their meal ticket. The fact of the matter is, Big Pharma spends lots of money on the New York Times, and the New York Times is not going to write an article that's going to piss off Big Pharma, even if it kind of likes the underlying policy. There's no way they're going to do that. So there's Musk's tweet. Wrote, no advertising for pharma. So does that mean he doesn't even want them in newspapers? I think he'd have a heck of a time getting it banned from newspapers because the FCC doesn't control newspapers. There's a lot of speech issues that would be completely implicated by that. New York Times, quite simply, is captive to its advertisers. Its advertisers include Big Pharma, for-profit healthcare. They're not going to tell you how good a ban on Big Pharma advertising would be. They're simply not. You're not getting the story from the New York Times because it's not in the interests of the people who pay them money for you to know the truth. That's the case on issue after issue after issue. Have a great Christmas if you celebrate it. And even if you don't, enjoy your day tomorrow. I'll see you on the 26th, and then I'll see you in the new year.